This is a story of a mother's sacrifice, a son's unending love, and a betrayal that happened under the very roof that was meant to be a safe haven. The mother's name was Sarah, and her son, the center of her universe, was named David. Sarah had given every piece of herself to raise her son, to protect him, and to give him the life she could only dream of. He grew up to be a good man, a successful doctor who loved his mother more than words could say. But he never imagined that the beautiful home he built to protect her, to honor her, would become the very place where her life was put in danger by the one person he trusted to love her as he did. I promise you, this is a powerful and emotional journey you will want to see through to the very end. It is a story filled with life-changing lessons about love, deception, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. So please, get comfortable and let us begin. And if you are new to our channel, we would be so happy if you would subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story. And please, give this video a thumbs up if it touches your heart. Our story begins not with the woman Sarah was today, but with the young woman she used to be. Many, many years ago, when Sarah was just 29 years old, her life broke into a million pieces. She came home early one afternoon, wanting to surprise her husband. But the surprise was hers. She walked into their bedroom, and there he was, with another woman. His arm was wrapped around her, and they were laughing, sharing a secret that did not include Sarah. Her world, which was once bright and full of color, suddenly turned gray. It was not the first time. It was the third time she had caught him, the third time he had shattered her trust. This time, she knew it had to be the last. The divorce was a terrible storm. There was so much yelling, so many bitter words. They fought in front of lawyers and judges. The arguments drained all the life and energy from her. All she wanted was to protect her son, her little David, who was only 8 years old. In the end, she won. The judge gave her full custody of David. But it was a hollow victory. The day the papers were signed, her husband walked out of the courtroom, and he walked out of their lives forever. He vanished. He never called. He never wrote a letter. He never sent a birthday card. It was as if he had left the city, or maybe even the country, as if he and his son had never existed for each other. Sarah was left completely alone, with a young boy to raise and a heart full of pain. She had very little money and no special skills, but she had something more important. She had a strength she did not even know she possessed, a strength born from her love for her son. She took any job she could find. In the mornings, she was a waitress at a small diner, rushing around with a heavy coffee pot, her feet aching before the sun was even fully in the sky. In the afternoon, she cleaned houses for wealthy families, scrubbing their floors and polishing their furniture, all while thinking of her own little home and the boy who was waiting for her there. Sometimes on weekends, she would work retail shifts at a clothing store, folding sweaters and smiling at customers even when she was so tired she could barely stand. Every day was a struggle. The worry about money was a constant weight on her shoulders. Would she have enough for the rent this month? Could she afford to buy David new shoes for school? The pain of her husband's betrayal was a dull ache in her heart that never truly went away. She made sacrifices, small and large, every single day. There were many nights she would eat just a piece of bread for dinner so that David could have a full plate of food. She would tell him she wasn't hungry, and she would smile as she watched him eat, her own stomach rumbling quietly. She would stay up late into the night after a long day of work, mending a tear in his jeans or sewing a button back onto his shirt so that he would always look neat and cared for at school. Through it all, she poured all her love and energy into raising him right. She was both a mother and a father. She was strict, but she was fair. She sat with him at the kitchen table every night, helping him with his homework. She was at every school event, her face shining in pride, cheering louder than anyone else when he did well. She taught him to be kind, to be honest, and to be strong. She taught him that even when life is hard, you must never, ever give up. Years passed, like pages turning in a book. David grew from a little boy into a smart and hard-working young man. He saw his mother's sacrifice. He saw her tired eyes and her worn-out hands, and it made him determined to succeed, not just for himself, but for her. He studied hard, won a scholarship to a great university, and then went on to medical school.
The day he became a doctor was the proudest day of Sarah's life. All the years of struggle, all the skipped meals, all the lonely nights, it had all been worth it. Her son had made it. He had built a wonderful, stable life for himself. He was a testament to her strength, a living symbol of her unending love. But the price of all those years of hard work finally came due. The long hours standing at the diner, the heavy lifting while cleaning houses, it had taken a toll on her body. One day, she suffered a bad hip dislocation. The injury from her past now caused her constant pain in her old age. It became difficult for her to walk. Soon, she could barely move without the help of a walking stick, and on bad days, she needed a wheelchair to get around. The moment David saw his mother struggling, he did not hesitate. "Mom," he said, his voice full of love and determination, "you are not living alone anymore. You are coming to live with me. You took care of me my whole life. Now it's my turn to take care of you." He brought her to his beautiful, spacious house. He had prepared a lovely room for her on the ground floor, with a large window that looked out onto a garden of roses. He made sure she had everything she could possibly want or need. He treated her like a queen. He would come home from the hospital, and no matter how tired he was, the first thing he would do was go to his mother's room, sit with her, and ask about her day. His love for her was a powerful, visible thing. He would have done anything in the world for her. For a time, it was just the two of them, and they were happy. Then, David met Clara. Clara was a beautiful woman with a charming smile and a voice like honey. She was smart and funny, and she seemed to adore David. To him, she was the perfect partner. When he introduced her to his mother, Clara was full of warmth and respect. She would call her Mom Sarah and would sit and listen to her stories for hours. Sarah was happy for her son. She believed he had found a good woman. Before David and Clara got married, David sat Clara down and had a very serious talk with her. He held her hands and looked deep into her eyes. "Clara, I need you to understand something. My mother, she is my whole world. You know the story. You know everything she went through to raise me. She sacrificed everything for me. Now that she is older and needs our help, I will never let her down. I need to know, truly know, that you will love her and care for her. I need you to treat her like she is your own mother." Clara put her hand on his cheek and smiled her sweetest smile. "Of course, my love," she said, her voice soft and sincere. "Your mother is a wonderful woman. I already love her. She will be my mother now, too. I promise you, I will take care of her and honor her always. You will never have to worry." David believed her. He married her, his heart full of joy, believing he had built the perfect, complete family. And at first, everything seemed perfect. Clara was the perfect daughter-in-law. She would bring Sarah her breakfast in the morning, fluff her pillows, and ask if she needed anything. She would talk to her with a sweet and gentle voice. She did all of this with a beautiful smile on her face. But Sarah began to notice something strange. Clara was only like this when David was home. Her kindness, her sweet voice, her loving gestures, they were for him to see. When David left for his long shifts at the hospital and the front door closed behind him, the house would become quiet, and in that quiet, Clara would change. Her smile would vanish. The warmth in her eyes would turn to ice. Her sweet voice would become flat and cold. It started with small things, a tray of food placed on the table just a little too roughly, a question from Sarah that was met with a long, cold silence, a request for a glass of water that was ignored for an hour. Sarah at first thought she was imagining things. She told herself she was just being a silly old woman. Clara was busy. She was stressed. It was a big adjustment having a mother-in-law living in her new home. Sarah did not want to cause any trouble. She did not want to complain and sound like a burden. So she said nothing. She would just sit in her room, a small, cold knot of worry forming in her stomach. She loved her son so much, and she could see how happy he was with his new wife. The last thing she ever wanted to do was ruin that happiness. She did not yet know that this small, cold feeling was just the beginning of a storm, a hidden, private storm that would threaten to destroy everything she held dear.
The changes in Clara was like the sun disappearing behind a dark cloud. One moment, there was warmth and light. The next, a sudden biting cold. This changes only happened when the sound of David's car faded down the street and the front door was locked for the day. At first, these cruelties was quiet. It was in the things she did not do. If Sarah dropped the book she was reading, Clara, who was in the same room, would pretend not to see. Sarah would have to struggle, her hip aching with pain, to try and reach it herself. If Sarah asked for a blanket because she felt a chill, Clara would say, "In a minute," but the minute would turn into an hour, and then 2, and the blanket would never come. Sarah felt a deep confusion in her heart. She would ask herself, did I do something wrong? Did I say something to offend her? She tried to be extra careful. She made sure her room was always neat. She never asked for too much. She only spoke when she was spoken to, her voice soft and polite. She did not want to be a problem. She did not want to give Clara any reason to be unkind. But it did not matter what Sarah did. The coldness grew. It began to turn from quiet neglect into something much darker. One afternoon, Sarah was in her wheelchair in the kitchen, watching Clara prepare lunch. She wanted to feel useful. She wanted to help, even in a small way. "Clara, my dear," she said gently, "would you like me to pour the water for us?" Clara did not look at her. She just pushed 2 glasses and a jug of water across the counter towards Sarah. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp. Sarah's hands were not as strong as they used to be. They trembled a little. As she tried to pour the water, her hand shook, and some of the water spilled onto the clean kitchen counter. It was not a big spill, just a small puddle. "Oh, I am so sorry," Sarah said immediately, her face full of embarrassment. "I am so clumsy. Let me clean that up." She started to wheel herself towards the sink to get a cloth. Suddenly, Clara slammed a knife down on the cutting board. The sound made Sarah jump. Clara turned around, and her face was like a thundercloud. The polite mask she wore to David was completely gone. Her eyes were narrow and filled with a strange, ugly anger. "You did that on purpose, didn't you, you old woman? You just wanted to make a mess for me to clean up. You were always trying to make more work for me." Sarah was shocked. Her heart started to beat fast like a trapped bird. "No, Clara, no! It was an accident, I promise. My hands, they are not very steady today." But Clara was not listening. She walked over to Sarah's wheelchair. She grabbed the handles from behind, her grip hard and painful. "You think you can just sit there all day being useless and making messes?" she said, her voice low and full of venom. Before Sarah could respond, Clara gave the wheelchair a violent shove. It was not a gentle push. It was a hard, angry jerk that sent a sharp shooting pain through Sarah's bad hip. Sarah cried out, a small gasp of pain and surprise. The wheelchair rolled forward and banged into the kitchen table. Clara just stood there watching her, a look of cold satisfaction on her face. "Next time, be more careful," she said. Then she turned back to the counter and continued making lunch as if nothing had happened. Sarah sat in her wheelchair trembling. It was not just the pain in her hip that hurt. It was the shock. It was the cruelty. It was the pure, undeserved hatred in Clara's eyes. That day, Sarah understood this was not a misunderstanding. This was not because Clara was having a bad day. This was something else. This was real. The abuse became a regular part of her life. It happened whenever David wasn't home. Sometimes Clara would forget to give Sarah her lunch. Sarah would sit in her room, her stomach empty, listening to Clara moving around the house until David was due home. Then, just before he arrived, Clara would rush in with a tray, smiling sweetly and saying, "Here you go, Mom Sarah, I made your favorite soup." Other times, Clara would hide her medication. Sarah's hip would ache with a deep, burning pain. But when she would ask for her pills, Clara would pretend she couldn't find them. "Oh, I don't know where they are," she would say with a shrug. "You must have misplaced them." Then, hours later, the pills would magically appear, right where they were supposed to be. The pushing also continued. If Sarah was in the way, Clara would not ask her to move. She would just shove her wheelchair hard. Every time it happened, a jolt of pain would go through Sarah's body. She began to live in a state of constant fear, always watching, always waiting for the next act of cruelty. Her beautiful new room began to feel like a prison. She cried every night, silently, into her pillow. She wondered what she had ever done to deserve this. Her life had been so hard, and she thought she had finally found peace and safety in her son's home. But now she was more alone and more scared than she had ever been.
One day, Sarah decided she could not bear the silence any longer. She had to know why. She had to understand where all this hatred was coming from. She waited until Clara came into her room to collect her laundry. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she took a deep breath and spoke. "Clara," she said, her voice shaking just a little, "can I please ask you a question?" Clara stopped and turned, her arms full of clothes. Her face was impatient. "What is it?" I need to know, what have I done to you?" Sarah asked, tears welling up in her eyes. "Why do you treat me like this? Why do you hate me so much? I have only ever tried to be kind to you. I welcomed you into our family with all my heart." Clara looked at Sarah, and then she did something that chilled Sarah to the bone. She laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was a cold, mocking sound. "You think I'm a fool, don't you?" Clara said, dropping the laundry onto the floor. She took a step closer to Sarah's wheelchair. "You think that old, Swede, helpless mother-in-law trick can fool me. I know you're kind. All of you are the same." "My kind?" Sarah whispered, completely confused. "I don't understand." "Mothers-in-law," she spat the words out like they were poison. "You are all wicked. You pretend to be kind. You pretend to be loving, but it's all an act. You just want to control your sons. You want to ruin their marriages. You want to turn them against their wives. My own mother warned me about women like you. She told me that the day a mother-in-law shows you the most kindness is the day you should be the most afraid, because that is when she is planning her attack." Sarah stared at her, horrified. "No," she said, shaking her head, "that is not me. I would never do that. I love my son more than anything, and I am so happy that he has found you. I just want him to be happy. That's all I have ever wanted." Clara laughed again.
"Save your lies, old woman. I will not give you the chance to poison my husband's mind against me. I will not let you control my house. This is my home now, and you are just a guest here, a guest who is going to learn her place." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving the laundry on the floor. After that day, things got even worse. The cruelty was no longer hidden. It was open and deliberate. Clara made sure Sarah felt miserable every single moment that David was not there. She would serve her tiny portions of food, not enough to fill even a small child. She would talk to her friends on the phone right outside Sarah's room, saying loud, hurtful things like, "Oh, having an old, sick person in the house is such a burden. It completely ruins the atmosphere." Sarah's heart was broken. The physical pain was terrible, but the emotional pain was 1,000 times worse. She felt like she was drowning in sadness. The only thing that kept her going was seeing David in the evenings. When he would walk into her room, his face tired but always smiling for her, she would push down all her pain and fear. She would smile back at him. She would ask about his day. She would pretend that everything was perfect. She could not tell him the truth. She was too afraid. She saw how much he loved Clara. If she told him, what would happen? He would be torn between his wife and his mother. Their home, which was his happy place, would be filled with fighting and anger. She could not do that to him. She had spent her whole life protecting him from pain. She would not be the one to cause it now. But one evening, Clara made her fear even greater. She came into Sarah's room after a particularly bad day. She had pushed Sarah so hard that Sarah's head had hit the wall. Clara leaned down, her face just inches from Sarah's. Her eyes were as cold and hard as stones. "I know you are thinking about telling him," Clara whispered, her voice a deadly hiss. "I see it in your pathetic, watery eyes, but I am warning you. If you ever say a single word of this to David, if I even suspect that you have told him anything, I will make sure you regret it." She paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "I will poison you," she said, her voice dropping even lower. "Not all at once. It will be slow. A little bit in your tea one day, a little bit in your soup the next. You will just get weaker and weaker. And when you finally die, everyone will think it was just your old age. David will cry, and I will be right there to comfort him. Do you understand me?" Sarah stared at her and saw nothing but pure, empty darkness. She believed her. She truly believed that Clara was capable of doing it. From that moment on, Sarah was trapped. She was a prisoner, not just in the house, but in her own silence. She was living with a monster, and her own son had no idea. She had to protect him, but she also had to protect herself. Her secret was a heavy, terrifying weight, and she had to carry it all alone.
The days that followed Clara's terrible threat were the darkest of Sarah's life. The house was no longer a home. It was a cage, and in this cage there was a silent predator, and there was Sarah. Every morning when she heard David's car leave for the hospital, a cold wave of fear would wash over her. The silence he left behind was heavy, filled with the unspoken promise of cruelty. Clara's abuse now had a new, sharper edge to it. She seemed to enjoy the power she had over Sarah. She knew Sarah was too terrified to speak, and this knowledge made her bolder. She would leave Sarah's meals just out of reach on a high counter and watch with a small, cruel smile as Sarah struggled to get to them. She would unplug the television in Sarah's room and hide the remote, leaving the old woman to sit in complete silence for hours
with nothing but her own fearful thoughts for company. Every act, no matter how small, was a reminder of the threat, a reminder that Clara held Sarah's life in her hands. Sarah grew thinner. The light in her eyes began to fade. The joy she felt when David came home was now mixed with a deep, bitter sadness, because she had to lie to him with every smile. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a gray, rainy day. Sarah was sitting in her room, looking through an old photo album. It was her most precious possession. It was filled with pictures of David as a little boy. There he was, with a gap-toothed smile on his first day of school. There he was, proudly holding up a drawing of a lopsided house. There was her favorite picture of all, a photo of the two of them, sitting on a park bench. David was about 10 years old, and he had his arm around her shoulders, his face full of boyhood love and pride. Sarah's own face in the picture was tired, but she was smiling a real, genuine smile of pure happiness. She held the album in her lap, her trembling fingers tracing the face of her little boy. This album was the story of her life's greatest work. It was the proof of her sacrifice and the proof of their unbreakable bond. Clara came into the room without knocking. She was holding a glass of water. "Here," she said, her voice flat, and she put the glass down on the small table next to Sarah. As she turned to leave, her eyes fell on the open photo album in Sarah's lap. She stopped. She looked at the picture of Sarah and young David on the park bench. A strange, ugly sneer twisted her lips. "Still living in the past, I see," Clara said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Back when you were the only woman in his life. You must hate me for taking that away from you." "That's not true," Sarah whispered, clutching the album tightly. "I am so happy he has you." Clara let out a short, nasty laugh. "Oh, please." She reached down, and before Sarah could react, she picked up the glass of water. With a deliberate, steady hand, she poured the entire glass of cold water directly onto the open page of the photo album. The water soaked into the old paper, blurring the faces, turning the precious memory into a watery, distorted mess. Sarah gasped. It felt as if the water had been thrown directly into her heart. "No!" she cried out, her voice full of anguish. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Just a little spill," Clara said with a shrug, placing the empty glass back on the table. She looked down at the ruined photograph, a look of triumph in her eyes. Then she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Sarah alone with the wreckage of her most cherished memory. Sarah stared at the blurred picture, and something inside of her finally broke. It was not just a photograph. It was a symbol of her entire life, of her love, of her sacrifices. And Clara had destroyed it with no more thought than she would give to stepping on an insect.
In that moment, Sarah realized that her silence was not protecting David. Her silence was allowing this evil to grow, to fester in his home. This poison that Clara had threatened her with was already here. It was a poison of hatred and cruelty, and it was seeping into the very walls of the house her son had built. She had to protect him, not from the truth, but from the lie he was living. Her fear for herself was still there, a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but her love for her son and her need to protect his goodness was finally, truly stronger. That night, she waited. She lay in her bed, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She heard David come home. She heard him and Clara talking and laughing in the kitchen. The sound, which used to bring her comfort, now sent a shiver down her spine. Later, she heard their footsteps go upstairs. The house grew quiet. An hour passed, then another. Finally, she heard a soft knock on her door. It was David, coming to say goodnight, just like he always did.
He came in and sat on the edge of her bed. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, his face tired but still so full of kindness. "How are you feeling tonight? Did you have a good day?" Sarah looked at her son, her wonderful, good-hearted son, and the lie caught in her throat. She could not do it anymore. Tears began to well up in her eyes. David's smile faded. His doctor's instincts took over. He saw the genuine distress in her eyes, the trembling of her lip. This was more than just her usual pain. "Mom, what is it? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice full of concern. He took her small, frail hand in his. Sarah took a shaky breath. It was the hardest thing she had ever had to do. "David," she began, her voice a raw whisper, I need to ask you something. Are you happy, my son? Are you truly happy?" David was confused. "Yes, of course I'm happy. I have a great job. I have a beautiful home. I have you. And I have Clara. Why would you ask me that?" This was it. The moment had come. "David," she said, her eyes pleading with him to believe her. "Clara, she is not who you think she is." David's brow furrowed. He looked completely baffled. "What are you talking about, Mom? Clara is wonderful. She loves you. She takes such good care of you." The tears began to fall freely now, rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. "No, son. No, she doesn't. That is only for you to see. When you are not here, when we are alone, she is a different person." David pulled his hand away slowly. A look of disbelief was hardening his face. "A different person? What does that mean?" Sarah's voice was breaking with every word. "She is cruel to me, David. She pushes me. She hides my medicine when I am in pain. Sometimes she does not give me food. Today she destroyed the picture of you and me in the park. She poured water all over it, right in front of me." David just stared at her, his mind reeling. This made no sense. It was impossible. The loving, gentle Clara he knew could not be the same person his mother was describing. "Mom, maybe you misunderstood. Maybe it was an accident. Clara would never—" "It was not an accident," Sarah said, a lifetime of pain and fear finally spilling out. "And there is more, David. There is something else, something terrible." She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. She threatened me. She said that if I ever told you the truth, she would poison me, a little bit at a time, so that no one would know, so that you would think I just died because I was old. The word poison hit David like a physical blow. He felt the air leave his lungs. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not confusion. This was a specific, horrifying accusation. He looked at his mother, his frail, weeping mother, and then he thought of his wife, the woman he loved, the woman asleep in their bed upstairs. His world was tilting on its axis. A hot, blind rage began to boil up inside him. He was a doctor. His life was about saving people, protecting them. And his own mother, under his own roof, was telling him she was in danger? He did not think. He only reacted. He stood up, his face a mask of fury. "I'll be right back," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. He stormed out of the room and up the stairs. He went into their bedroom and flipped on the light. Clara woke up with a start, blinking in the sudden brightness. "David, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice sleepy. "Get up," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Get up right now." He told her everything. He repeated every word his mother had said. The pushing, the food, the destroyed photograph, the final terrible threat of poison. As he spoke, Clara's face transformed. It was a masterful performance. The sleepiness was replaced by a look of utter shock and disbelief. Then her eyes filled with tears. She began to cry, not loudly, but with deep, heartbreaking sobs. "David, no!" she wept, clutching the bedsheets. How could you even think these things? How could she say these things?" She looked at him, her face a perfect picture of a wounded, innocent victim. "David, my love, I know this is hard for her. I know it is. She had you all to herself for so many years, and now I am here. She must feel like I'm taking you away from her. I have tried so hard to be her friend, to make her feel loved. I thought we were getting along." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "The picture! It was an accident, David, I swear it was. I tripped and the water spilled. I told her I was so sorry. As for the other things, her medicine, her age, sometimes she gets confused. She forgets things. She imagines things. Oh, David, this is breaking my heart. She is turning you against me. I knew this would happen. My mother warned me this would happen." David stood there, his anger beginning to falter. He looked at his crying wife, who seemed so genuinely hurt, so devastated by the accusations. Her explanation, it sounded so reasonable. His mother was old. She was on strong medication. Could she be confused? Could she be jealous and not even realize it? The seed of doubt had been planted. He looked from his wife's tear-streaked face back towards the hallway that led to his mother's room. His heart was being torn in two. He loved his mother with every fiber of his being, but he also loved his wife. One of them was telling a terrible story, and for the first time in his life, he did not know who to believe.
The rest of the night was sleepless for everyone in that house. David left his bedroom and went to sleep on the sofa downstairs. He could not bear to be in the same room as Clara, but he also could not bring himself to go back to his mother's room. He was lost in a fog of confusion and doubt. He lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying both conversations over and over in his mind. He saw his mother's face, etched with genuine terror, her tears real and heartbreaking. He heard her desperate whispers about being poisoned. A mother's love, he knew, was the purest thing on earth. His mother had never lied to him, not once in his entire life. Her whole world had been built around protecting him and telling him the truth. But then he saw Clara's face. Her beautiful face crumpled in what looked like absolute agony. He heard her heartbroken sobs, her voice full of pain as she spoke of his mother's confusion and possible jealousy. Could it be true? As a doctor, he knew that aging and medication could sometimes cause confusion, even paranoia. Clara's explanation that his mother felt replaced was a story as old as time. It made a sad, logical kind of sense. His heart was at war with his head. His heart screamed, "Believe your mother," but his head whispered, "Be rational, look at all the facts." Clara had been nothing but kind and loving in front of him. She was his wife, the woman he had chosen to build a life with. To believe his mother meant that his wife was a monster, a cruel, calculating monster who was capable of the most evil acts. It was almost too horrible to imagine. The next morning, an icy silence filled the house. David got ready for work without saying a word to anyone. He saw Clara in the kitchen. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying all night. She looked at him with a silent, pleading expression. He just turned away. He quickly went to his mother's room. She was sitting up in bed, looking small and fragile. She looked at him with hopeful, frightened eyes. He did not know what to say to her. "I have to go to work, Mom," he said, his voice flat. "We will talk more tonight." He could not meet her gaze. He turned and left, closing the door behind him, leaving his mother alone with a new and terrible kind of pain, the pain of not being believed. All day at the hospital, David could not focus. He moved through his rounds like a ghost. The faces of his patients blurred before his eyes. The words on their charts made no sense. His mind was a battlefield. His mother's terrified face, his wife's heartbroken face, the accusations, the denials. It was a storm of confusion that offered no peace. He had always been a man of logic, a man of evidence. As a doctor, he could not make a diagnosis based on emotion alone. He had to observe. He had to gather proof. And as he sat in his office, staring at a patient's X-ray, an idea began to form in his mind. An idea that made him feel sick to his stomach, but one he knew he had to follow.
He had been fooled by his wife's emotional trick. He could feel it in his gut. His mother had never given him any reason to doubt her. Clara, on the other hand, her performance last night had been almost too perfect, too practiced. He had been so overwhelmed, so caught between them, that he had let her plant a seed of doubt. But now, in the clear, cold light of day, his instincts were telling him something was terribly wrong. His mother was not confused. She was scared. And he, her son, had walked away from her when she needed him most. The thought filled him with a deep, chilling shame. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was just after lunchtime. He made a decision. He walked out of his office, told the head nurse that a family emergency had come up, and he walked out of the hospital. He got into his car, but he did not drive home. Not right away. He drove to a nearby electronics store. He walked inside and bought a small, discreet security camera, a nanny cam. It was so small it could be hidden almost anywhere. His heart was pounding as he drove home. He felt like a spy in his own life. He hated what he was doing, but he knew with a certainty that was growing stronger by the minute that it was the only way to find the truth. He had to see what happened when he wasn't there. He had to see which woman was the real Clara, the loving wife or the cruel monster. He parked his car down the street so Clara wouldn't see it from the window. He walked to his own front door and used his key, turning it as quietly as possible. He slipped inside. The house was quiet. He could hear the low sound of the television coming from the living room. Clara was in there, watching a show. He moved silently, like a thief, down the hallway to his mother's room. The door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open just enough to slip inside, his heart in his throat. His mother was asleep in her bed, her breathing soft and even. He felt a wave of love and guilt wash over him.
He quickly looked for a place to hide the camera. He saw a bookshelf filled with his mother's favorite novels. It was perfect. He placed the tiny camera behind a row of books, making sure the small lens had a clear view of the entire room, especially his mother's bed and the area around her favorite wheelchair. He quickly connected it to an app on his phone. The setup was complete in less than 2 minutes. He took one last look at his sleeping mother, his heart aching. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, so quietly that it was not even a sound. "I will fix this. I promise." He slipped back out of the room and then out of the house just as quietly as he had come in. He got back in his car, drove around the block, and went back to the hospital. No one would ever know he had been gone. For the rest of the afternoon, he could not take his eyes off his phone. He sat at his desk, pretending to work, but all his attention was on the live feed from the camera in his mother's room. For a long time, nothing happened. He just watched his mother sleeping peacefully. A part of him prayed that nothing would happen. A part of him hoped desperately that he was wrong, that his wife was innocent, that this whole nightmare was just a terrible misunderstanding. Then, at around 3 o'clock, he saw the door to his mother's room open on the screen of his phone. Clara walked in. She was holding a tray with a cup of tea and a small plate of cookies. David held his breath. Clara walked over to the bed and gently shook Sarah's shoulder. "Mom, Sarah," he heard her say through the phone's speaker. Her voice was the sweet, gentle voice he knew so well. "Wake up, dear. I've brought you some tea." Sarah woke up slowly. She looked at Clara, and David could see the fear in her eyes, even on the small screen. "Thank you, Clara," Sarah said, her voice weak. Clara placed the tray on the bedside table. "You must feel so weak after all the drama last night, Clara," said, her voice full of fake sympathy. "It's so important you keep your strength up." Then, Clara did something that made David's blood run cold. She reached into the pocket of her apron. She pulled out a small, unlabeled bottle filled with a clear liquid. David's eyes widened. He sat bolt upright in his chair, his heart hammering against his ribs.
Clara unscrewed the cap. She looked at Sarah, and the sweet, caring mask dropped from her face. It was replaced by the same cold, cruel sneer Sarah had described. "You thought you could win, didn't you?" she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. "You thought you could turn him against me. You are a stupid old woman. He was confused for a moment, but he loves me. He will always choose me." Sarah started to shake her head, her eyes wide with terror. "No, please." "I warned you," Clara continued, her voice devoid of all emotion. "I told you what would happen if you opened your mouth. Now you are going to drink this tea, all of it. It's the first dose. It won't do much. It will just make you feel a little more tired, a little weaker. David will think your health is just getting worse. And every day I will give you a little more, and he will watch you fade away, and he will never, ever know it was me." She picked up the small bottle and tilted it over the teacup. A few drops of the clear liquid fell into the hot tea. Sarah began to struggle. "No, get away from me, don't!" she cried, trying to push herself away. "Oh, stop fighting!" Clara snapped. She put the bottle back in her pocket and grabbed the teacup. She held it with one hand, and with the other she reached for Sarah, trying to grab her face, trying to force her to drink. "You will drink this. You brought this on yourself." David was no longer sitting. He was on his feet, his phone gripped in his hand so tightly the screen was in danger of cracking. He was watching a live horror movie, and the victim was his own mother. The monster was his own wife. The rage he had felt last night was nothing compared to the icy, murderous fury that now filled every cell of his body. He did not hang up. He did not turn it off. He kept watching, his eyes burning, as his mother fought for her life, her small, weak hands pushing against the woman who was trying to poison her. He needed to see it all. He needed this undeniable, horrifying proof. Then he turned and ran. He ran out of his office, not stopping to speak to anyone. He ran through the hospital corridors, past shocked nurses and patients. He ran out of the building and to his car. He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking with rage. He got in the car and he drove, his foot pressing the accelerator to the floor. He was not just driving home. He was going to save his mother, and he was going to make sure that the woman he once called his wife would pay for what she had done.
David drove faster than he had ever driven in his life. The world outside his car was a blur of colors and shapes. The only thing that was clear was the image on his phone, which he had propped up on the passenger seat. The live video feed was still playing. He could see his mother, his frail, beloved mother, fighting with a strength born of pure terror. She was twisting her head from side to side, her lips sealed tight, her small hands pushing weakly against Clara's arms. He could hear Clara's voice, a low, angry hiss. "Drink it, just drink it, you stubborn old witch." Every second that passed felt like an hour. David's heart was a drum beating a frantic rhythm of rage and fear. Rage at the woman he had trusted, the woman he had loved, who was now revealing herself to be a monster. And fear, a cold, terrifying fear that he would be too late. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, and pushed the car to go even faster. He did not care about traffic laws. He did not care about anything but getting home. Finally, his street came into view. He screeched the car to a halt right in front of his house, not even bothering to park it properly. He did not turn off the engine. He did not take the keys. He threw the car door open and ran. He sprinted up the walkway to his own front door, the place that was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of peace and love. He fumbled in his pocket for his keys, his hands shaking too much to fit the key into the lock. With a roar of pure frustration and fury, he gave up on the key. He drew back his foot and kicked the door with all his strength. The wood splintered around the lock and the door flew open, crashing against the inside wall.
He burst into the house and ran down the hallway to his mother's room. The scene that met his eyes was exactly what he had been watching on his phone, but 1,000 times more horrifying in real life. Clara had his mother pinned against the headboard of the bed. One of her hands was tangled in Sarah's soft, silver hair, forcing her head back. Her other hand was holding the teacup, trying to press it against his mother's struggling lips. Sarah was making small, desperate, muffled sounds, her eyes wide with mortal terror. She saw David in the doorway, and her eyes screamed a silent message of both relief and horror. When Clara heard the door crash open, she froze. For a split second, she did not move. Then she slowly turned her head. When she saw David standing there, his face was not something she recognized. It was not the face of her kind, loving husband. It was the face of a stranger, a face contorted with a rage so pure and so cold it was terrifying. His eyes were like burning coals. The teacup slipped from Clara's fingers and crashed to the floor, shattering into a dozen pieces, the poisoned tea splashing across the carpet. The spell was broken. Clara's face instantly transformed. The cruel, angry mask vanished, and the pathetic, weeping victim from the night before reappeared. Tears instantly filled her eyes. She let go of Sarah and took a step back, her hands held up as if in surrender. "David, please," she cried, her voice a perfect imitation of shock and confusion. "Oh, thank God you're home. It's not what it looks like. I was just trying to get her to drink her tea. She was having one of her episodes. She was confused and fighting me. I was only trying to help her." It was the same emotional trick, the same desperate play for his sympathy. But this time, it had no power. This time, he had not just heard a story. He had seen the truth with his own eyes. David did not look at Clara. He walked past her as if she was not even there. He went straight to his mother. He knelt by her bed, and gently, with hands that were now soft and shaking with relief, he smoothed back her hair. "Are you okay, Mom?" he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Are you hurt?" Sarah was crying, deep, shuddering sobs of a terror that was finally over. She threw her weak arms around his neck and held on to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had been spinning out of control. "My son," she wept, "my son." He held her for a long moment, just reassuring himself that she was real, that she was safe. Then he gently laid her back against the pillows. He stood up and turned to face his wife. Clara was still crying, still trying to play her part. "David, please," she begged, taking a step towards him. "You have to believe me. She's not well. She's making it all up." David held up his hand, and the single, simple gesture stopped her in her tracks. His face was calm now, but it was a dead, frightening calm. "Don't," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Don't say another word, not one more lie." He pulled his phone out of his pocket. He turned the screen towards her. On it, the video was still playing, rewinding to the moment she had taken the small bottle from her pocket. He pressed play. Clara's own voice filled the silent room, her cold, hissing, venomous voice. "You thought you could win, didn't you? I warned you. Now you are going to drink this tea. I will give you a little more every day, and he will watch you fade away, and he will never, ever know it was me." The color drained from Clara's face. The fake tears dried up instantly. Her mouth fell open. The performance was over. The truth was there, on the screen, undeniable and ugly. She had been caught, completely and utterly caught. Her face changed one last time. The innocent victim disappeared, and in its place was a look of pure, cornered panic. "David, no, please!"
she stammered, her real voice, a voice of fear, finally emerging. I was just trying to scare her. I wasn't really going to hurt her, I swear. I love you. Please, don't do this." David just looked at her. His eyes filled not with rage anymore, but with a deep, profound disgust. He could not believe that he had ever loved this person, that he had ever shared his life, his home, with such a dark and twisted soul. He saw his mother, his wonderful, self-sacrificing mother who had endured this torment in silence to protect his happiness. And he felt the last piece of his love for Clara turn to dust and blow away. Without taking his eyes off her, he dialed a number on his phone. Who are you calling?" Clara whispered, her body starting to tremble. "The police," David said, his voice as cold and hard as steel. He put the phone to his ear. "Yes, hello? I need to report an attempted murder." Clara let out a wail of despair. She fell to her knees, crawling towards him, grabbing at his legs. "No, David, please, don't ruin my life. We can fix this. I'll do anything. Please, I'm your wife." David looked down at her, his face unmoved. "You stopped being my wife the first time you laid a hand on my mother." The police arrived quickly. They saw the shattered teacup on the floor. They saw the terror on Sarah's face, and they watched the video on David's phone. Clara was arrested, still sobbing and begging, her pathetic pleas echoing down the hallway as they led her away in handcuffs. In the weeks that followed, David's life was rebuilt. The divorce was swift. In court, the video was the only evidence needed. Clara was found guilty of attempted murder and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The house that had become a place of fear was cleansed of her presence. But the most important healing was the healing that took place between David and his mother. He was consumed with guilt for ever having doubted her. "Mom, I am so sorry," he told her one afternoon as they sat together in the garden. "I should have believed you from the very first word. I can never forgive myself for making you feel like you were alone." Sarah reached out and took his hand. Her eyes were clear and bright again. The fear was gone, replaced by the same deep, endless love she had always had for him. "My son," she said, her voice soft but strong, "you have nothing to be sorry for. You were caught in a terrible web of lies, but you did not stay there. You searched for the truth, and you saved me. You are my hero, David. You have always been my hero." And in that moment, sitting in the warm sunshine, holding his mother's hand, David finally understood. The house, the career, the marriage, they were not the signs of his success. His true success was his mother. It was her love that had made him who he was. And protecting that love, honoring that sacrifice, was the most important work he would ever do. Dear viewers, this story teaches us that the bond between a mother and child is one of the most powerful forces on earth. It reminds us to always listen to our hearts, especially when the people we love are in pain. And it shows us that while evil can sometimes disguise itself with a beautiful smile, the truth, in the end, will always, always come to light. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. What are your thoughts on this story? Was David right to call the police, or should he have handled it another way? If you were Sarah, would you have forgiven Clara? Let us know in the comments below.
And don't forget to subscribe, give the story a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new stories from us. Until next time, be kind to one another, and always remember, at Virtuous Stories, we love you.